As we mentioned, certainly not the warmest welcome for President Rouhani's return to Iran. Still, he and President Obama say their historic conversation was a step forward toward reaching a deal on Iran's disputed nuclear program. Really? Well, for more on this, let's talk to Mark Dubowitz, the Executive Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark, good to see you. You know, at the United Nations, Rouhani snubbed President Obama not once, not twice, 3 times. Now, all of a sudden, he takes a phone call from Mr. Obama. And in Iran, as you saw, reaction is mixed, equal parts compliment and condemnation. What do you make of all of this?
Well, Greg, I think Rouhani strolled into New York for a week and was met with a litany of Rouhaniphoria. I mean, this was a great excitement for the so-called new moderate leader. And President Obama did everything he could to get a handshake and then finally a phone call, virtually begging the Iranian regime for that phone call. I think in Tehran, the hardliners are actually pleased. I mean, they got President Obama's speech where he committed not to engage in regime change in Tehran, and Rouhani got all of this without giving up anything in the way of nuclear concessions or conceding anything on the world stage.
Speaking of which, President Obama insists that a diplomatic solution over Iran's nuclear program can be negotiated. But in his speech at the UN, Rouhani said Iran will never, ever give up its uranium enrichment. And of course, as you know, Iran is already close to what's referred to as nuclear breakout capacity, meaning it can finish a device in a matter of weeks. So, you know, Mark, in truth, what's there to negotiate?
Greg, that's exactly right. I mean, actually, the Iranians have declared domestic enrichment to be non-negotiable. So they've said that that would be capitulation if they gave up the right to enrich uranium on their soil. Now, excluding Iran, there are 33 countries in the world with nuclear programs, of which 19 of those countries have peaceful nuclear programs without domestic enrichment or plutonium reprocessing. The 14 countries that do have that, 9 of them have nuclear weapons, which leaves 5 countries, Holland, Germany, Japan, Brazil, and Argentina, with peaceful programs and no domestic enrichment. We are being asked to believe that Iran, which has pursued nuclear weaponization activities for years, is going to be more like Holland or Japan than Pakistan and North Korea. I mean, it defies belief.
And they're developing a delivery system of long-range missiles. They support terrorism, so inherently they cannot be trusted. But the United States and others have been negotiating with them nonetheless for years, and it's gone absolutely nowhere. The leadership doesn't give a whit that sanctions hurt their people. The mullahs are utterly indifferent. Their goal seems to clearly be a nuclear bomb. So are you skeptical that this new approach will do anything but serve Iran to give them more time to pursue the bomb?
I think that's exactly the strategy. Iran is about 9 or 10 months away from having critical nuclear capability and an undetectable breakout, which means they could weaponize uranium without the IAEA or Western intelligence detecting that breakout.
Right.
The Iranian game is to stretch out the negotiations, keep adding centrifuges, build up the critical capability, negotiate for domestic enrichment, and any deal that is eventually signed, if any deal could be signed, would still give them that ability to break out or sneak out to a bomb.
So do you think, that the Obama administration, is sort of being played here, they're being snookered, and that the president himself, in pursuing this strategy, may be naive?
Greg, I hope not. I hope the Obama administration understands the history of Iranian nuclear deception and that this president, Rouhani, is the very man who's engaged in that nuclear deception when he was the former nuclear negotiator for Iran. I hope the administration understands that the smiling cleric has nice, moderate-sounding pieties, but the supreme leader, the scowling leader back in Iran, has spent his entire life devoted to building a nuclear weapon, and he's not going to surrender that because of moderate-sounding pieties or a negotiated deal.
You know, President Obama's United Nations speech has faced some withering criticism because it seemed to some, or many, to focus on America's failures and a disinterest in democracy, especially in Iran. In fact, the Washington Post editorial page, this was pretty stunning, called this the most morally crimped speech by a president in modern times. What do you think?
Look, I think the president completely ignored in his speech human rights, certainly the human rights abuses of this regime. He has ignored this regime's terrorism, the fact that this regime has been killing Americans for years. And he specifically said, we're not interested in regime change. And as I mentioned, the second most powerful man in Iran, a man named Qasem Soleimani, who's the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force, he said that this was not a sign of beneficence, but this was an admission of impotence. He's taken our number, and he recognizes that the United States is not interested in being a Middle East power. That is a very, very worrying sign.
And a pretty condemning word, impotence. Mark Dubowitz, good to see you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.